Let's kind of start. I know everybody is super excited to see so many international people inside an Indian event now. So we have Punit Bhatia, right, directly from Brussels, and Brazil being EU headquarters of everything. So I think the right place to talk to somebody in privacy, isn't it? We have Jeff. I knew Jeff when I did not get a ranking, but I read all the rankings from Jeff in the podcast. And Jeff also kind of takes care of PrivacyPlan. And to all of you here, I think Jeff may be the best person to kind of follow, to understand what podcast to listen to. So he has a great metric out there. You'll find very few of mine, but I still listen to podcasts, right? So that I can also learn and get better at it. So, and that is Jeff for you, right? So, and he runs PrivacyPlan. I can tell everybody here, right? I'm being very honest, right? If you kind of follow Jeff and Punit, even on LinkedIn, just by following both of them, you will be very intact with a lot of privacy things across the world. And US being the beautiful place, I think Jeff is the right person to look at so many laws, right? CCPA, then Virginia, right? Then what not in US right now. So maybe the best guy to be here, talking to everyone, right? Giving us knowledge, right? Sharing wisdom, right? Thank you, Punit, and thank you, Jeff, for coming in. So my name is Akarsh Singh, and I also run a podcast, right? A privacy podcast, but just learning, just getting into this field. And I think there are two good podcasts, right? So you can listen to, and especially Jeff is here. So I think he's the best guy to kind of showcase which podcast to hear, because privacy is not an Indian thing, right? It's an international thing. And there's already a lot of things internationally that we can take and learn and grow faster, right? So let's not do so many mistakes that everybody has already done internationally, right? And maybe take a lot of mistakes and learnings and just follow it through in India. Okay, so I have a first question. So my question number one is for Punit, right? So Punit, how was your journey as a privacy podcaster?
It was complicated, let's put it like that. And it was impromptu also. So I was intending to leave my job just like you and become an entrepreneur. I was clarifying what I want to do as an entrepreneur. And then somebody suggested you should record a podcast. I said, what is it? So just like all of us, I recorded some episodes, and somebody said you should record 5 or 6 episodes. So I did so. And then I went back to the gentleman who advised me, you should record some podcast. I said, what do we do with it? How do we do? And then he said, don't worry, just keep recording. And now I'm not that kind of a person. You know me. And then I recorded somebody who was high up in the authorities, Data Protection Authority, president of one of the countries. And then he says, Punit, when are you launching it? And you know how most entrepreneurial or Indian people are. They would say 2 weeks from now. Normally we will say next week, but I was a little bit lenient because I've been in Europe. So I said 2 weeks from now. Then I did not know what to do. Exactly. And I'm being honest, nothing to know. And I was like 7 episodes recorded. What do I do? This guy has to be the episode 1. What do I do? So I call a few people and they say 7,000 pounds for lifetime. And I said, boss, lifetime, I don't know how long you will live or I will live. So it can't be a lifetime. That's definitely a scam. And then I search. There are so many options. And then I've discovered long story short, this is the way to do it. And I was very clear, I want to do a video podcast and audio podcast. So I started it. And then I called that guy saying, and then the guy was a little bit pushing me. 3 or 4 days. Is it really coming this week or next week? I said, boss, you have to do it. So like all entrepreneurs, I edited myself, I constructed everything, got the tools, and then launched it and said, this is the episode. Didn't have a name, called it Fit for Privacy. And that's how it was. But after that, I realized I met you, I met Jeff, I met Gabe, and I met so many people. But I think you and me were in touch even before. Even Jeff, probably we were in touch, but the network expanded. And then I realized, okay, now there's a podcast, you have to make it popular. So I was doing things other way around. Things were happening and I needed to do it. And little did I realize after 25 episodes, how long am I going to do it? Then I saw following me, a lot of people have created a podcast. And then I said, I should not stop. And then by that time, I get in touch with Jeff and I asked him, what is your criteria for ranking? Because I was ranked well. He says, regular episodes. So I said, I can't mess up on that one. He said, more episodes, the more the scoring. I said, can't mess up on that one. So I carried on and on. And last year, I had a challenge because you, being a podcaster yourself, would agree. I mean, it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of cost. And then I was like, do I want to do it? And then I look at it as more a medium to connect with people, more a medium to get your voice out. And then the question is also, if you say journey, do you get, sponsors in or not? So there's a lot of complexity. But long story short, it happened for me impromptu, thanks to a push from a gentleman who helped me get this podcast launched, and another gentleman who said, boss, when is this episode coming? That's how it happened. Very impromptu, but very homegrown, self-driven. And I can tell you, you can launch a podcast for $0, euros, rupees, whatever, provided you are willing to put some effort.
Right, sir. I think we're going to take away, I'm going to repeat this question at the last, that how do we kind of do this in $0? I'll probably, I think this is one of the best learnings for everyone right here, because I know a lot of people here actually want to record this, want to come out with something that they know and want to share their knowledge with. So that's a great point. Putting on to Jeff, right? So Jeff, you've seen so many podcasts, right? You have ranked them, right? You have listened to them, right? You've spent time, right? Would you like kind of put in for everyone in the session, right? What is it that they start with? Let's say there are so many podcasts, right? Every podcast is special, right? If you look at mine, the first was technology. So I was only talking about tech, right? And Punit was talking to a lot of senior people as to what their issues were, right? At that point in time, how do you say this is implementation? So what would you suggest to such a wide audience today? If they want to look for a podcast, right? What are those 3-4 things that they can think about initially?
Well, you have to differentiate yourself in today's marketplace. Anybody can start a podcast. It's pretty easy to do. You can do it on a shoestring. You can, do it in your basement. It's not hard. All you really need to do is have an idea and a voice. And it's pretty easy with the platforms out there today to have a voice. But to be able to get heard, you have to have, a way to really get people's attention. And to get people's attention, you have to have some sort of a hook. For a while, privacy itself was a hook, but now that's probably not enough. In my database of privacy podcasts now, I've got 116 different podcasts. Now, all of those aren't just data privacy, right? They sort of, go into other sort of sub-disciplines as well, right? But even if you look at the ones that are just data privacy, that's probably like 30, I mean, there are just so many, things to listen to. So you have to have some sort of a hook, right? Some sort of a differentiation. And that's really one of the things that I liked about your podcast, right? Was the focus on tech. And the Data Diva, right? Her podcast, right? Focuses a lot on cutting edge tech, which is one of the reasons I like her podcast so much. But everybody has sort of a different thing, right? And what intrigues me so much about the podcast market is everybody can sort of focus on something a little bit different and bring value, right? And make it an interesting thing. Punit's focus is different, right? And I love his show. So, you just have to figure out what your niche is and bring that to your audience.
Right, Jeff. So it's about the niche, and it's about the need of the market, and it's about what you're learning at. Punit, I have another question for you, right? So I think we talked about how you kind of, went in, thought about it, got that push, right? And produced your podcast, right? But still, if you kind of, want to summarize those few things, like a few pointers for somebody who would maybe want to start a podcast, what are those 3 pointers, right? Somebody has to keep in mind before they produce a podcast. And I'm talking about total production here, Punit.
So you're looking for production perspective, not niche and all those things.
The total, not niche, but I'm just saying as in development. Let's say if somebody has to make a podcast X, right? It can be any podcast.
Okay, any topic, not privacy.
No privacy. It can be anything. I'm just asking, what are those 3-4 points?
So there are a few things one has to take in mind. First thing is, why do you want to do a podcast? That's a very, very important question. Are you going to do it for the reason of marketing your company? That's fine. But are you going to bring knowledge to people? Are you going to bring value to people? Why do you want to do it? So why question is the first and foremost you need to answer. And when you answer why, then you decide on what will be the format. Format meaning, will you speak? Then after a while, it will become boring because you will not have anything to say unless you're reading out news. So that's another challenge. So luckily, the person who guided me said, interview guests. Now, interview guest is also a question. Are you going to interview? I know some of my fellow podcasters, they interview clients, but prospective clients. Some of them do prospective, partners. Some of them have clients and they give them a show or a place. Some of them have students and they bring in. So you need to know who will be your guest and how will your audience be. So what your format will be, let's say, second question. Then becomes the technical aspect. Is it video or audio? Because if you have audio, that's easy. If you have video as well, there's a complexity of editing video and so on. And then last but not least is, you got to ask yourself the tough question. I've seen many people, and Jeff would vouch for that, start a podcast, do a few episodes, and then go away. The question you got to ask yourself is, are you in for it for 100 episodes? That is at least 100 weeks. That is at least 2 years. So you got to plan your mental energy, financial energy, resources, and everything. Because at a certain point, let's say you are interviewing people. How many times can you interview people? How many people can you find? And what kind of people do you want? And then you have to create seasons. So you need to be answering these questions very, very clearly. Why do you want to do it? Who do you want to do it for? And rather, what format? And then eventually the consistency aspect. If you are in for, most people say, I will do a few episodes, then I will see. I tell them, sorry, boss, leave it. Why bother? If you're in for 100 episodes, then go for it.
Right, sir. I just want to add my story to that.
Of course, please do.
And exactly same thing happened. When I launched my first season, after 8 episodes, I was tired, right? And I had spent all my resources. And that time, the startup was really small. The Tsaaro was really, really small when we were doing this podcast in May, February. So we were very small. I spent a lot of time on this. But after 8 episodes, I was done with it. Then I again worked on it by end of this year, right? Then again started, recorded 5 more, posted 5 more. But that's very true. And I think after 5th episode, this is the 6th episode. So this was a con hook, right, to Jeff. I'm like, Jeff, now I think we want to have 1 more episode now, right? So, okay, totally with you.
If I may add what you said, it's very good that you keep coming back. But one thing I learned over time, I like to be in control and like to be easy. If I don't have an episode next week, I will panic. So what I do is I record about 2 months or 3 months in advance, and I keep a backlog of it. All I do is I schedule them on a basis like, okay, let's edit schedule. So it's very easy. Like right now, I'm already done for till end of March. So that's another thing people should do. So apart from consistency, like you mentioned, after 8 episodes, you are done. So if after 8 episodes, you have still 8 to schedule automatically, you have those 8 weeks or 8 episodes to take it easy. Right. That's another thing I learned with the time.
That is something that I will also take back with me. And I think last time when I had a discussion with you last year also, so I think that's a very good learning that I had. So I did similar stuff, right? Learning from you when you said that you're recording for the future, right? So I definitely took some learning there. But yeah, it's not an easy business, right? So I think just
it's not easy. It's very difficult. Yeah, sometimes you have friends, sometimes you have people you respect, and they ask you, they want to be on the show.
Yeah.
And you have to say no.
Yeah.
And you have to say no because you know your audience, you know what you are doing, and somehow they don't fit in. And that's a very hard thing, especially for us people. I mean, me coming from India and you being in India, saying no is the most difficult thing for us.
Right. Yeah, that happens with me because you need to adjust, right? It's as Jeff mentioned, right? It's more about the audience, right? It's more about the type that we are trying to bring in different, right? It's not about friendship anymore, right? It was, right? Maybe I think a lot of people definitely do podcasts, with their clients, right? But again, they still have that hook, right? With those clients, right? They're getting business out of clients. So I think that kind of makes sense for them. But I think next question, I think I want to put it through Jeff. So Jeff, I think what are these prominent learnings I think that you would have looking at so many podcasts? And now I'm asking from a podcaster's perspective. Let's say a podcaster is kind of there's so many podcasters around you, right? And you are kind of reviewing all those podcasts. So what are these learnings, you have found out, that other podcasters for tomorrow can take back with them so that they don't do those mistakes, Jeff?
All right. So here's the biggest thing. I listen to probably more podcasts than, at least privacy podcasts, than anybody on the planet, right? So because I have to listen to them so that I know, that I know how to rank people. And plus I just like to listen to them anyway. But when I'm scrolling through different podcasts to see what to listen to next, I often look at the titles of podcasts and think, do I want to listen to this? And often my finger sort of hovers over that title, and I'm like, I don't know, it doesn't sound very interesting. And the point is, right, oftentimes I'll click it and say, all right, well, I need to listen to this one. And it'll turn out to be really good, right? But the titles are often not very good. They're not compelling, right? They're not telling me why I need to listen. Now, you don't want to write clickbait titles, right? But you need to have better titles than a lot of people are actually putting on their podcasts. They're not telling me why I need to listen, either in the titles or sometimes even in the descriptions. Podcasters aren't doing the technicals of essentially the SEOs of podcasting particularly well. They're neglecting that piece of podcasting. We talked about, deciding what kind of niche you're in, right? And Punit talked about figuring out who your audience is. Well, then you have to actually feed your audience, right? By telling them why they want to listen, by putting in the right descriptions and the right titles. Part of that is deciding who you're going to interview. Say, for instance, you're going to interview Jules Polonetsky, right? I mean, he's a huge person in privacy. He gets interviewed a lot. If you're going to interview him, we know to some extent what he's going to say. I mean, he has lots of different opinions, right? But if you're going to interview him on your show, what's your angle? I mean, okay, great. But I've heard him interviewed 20 times now, right? Why do I want to hear your perspective? Or what are you going to ask him that's different from everybody else, right? I need to know that a little bit in the title. So what kind of questions are you going to ask him? Or what's the angle that you're bringing that's different from everybody else? Otherwise, why do I want to listen to your interview of him?
I think this is something that I do. And so I do this because I kind of find that, and I can relate to you because, especially in India, right? People, let me be very honest with you, right? People in India are not used to learning videos, right? We love Netflix, right? We love Shark Tank nowadays, right? We love everything, right? But that content needs to have some masala, right? The masala, the Indian spices to it, right? So, and without that spices, right, it becomes very difficult to kind of even post. So nowadays, what I'm doing is I'm doing a lot of masala content in the end. So if people are doing hooks, then they can listen to, let's say, something in masala, right? Like a direct question to people about something that they would like to answer, they would not like to answer. But yeah, they obviously can refuse it, but there is some masala at the end. So yeah, if people kind of stay to PrivacyCast for some time, you'll find some hook there for sure, or you can just forward it. So, but I have a question for Punit now. What are the must-have tools and gadgets? And Faith has asked you with so much faith now. What are the tools and gadgets for starting a podcast, Punit?
Starting a podcast, don't buy anything. That I know it sounds counterproductive. I'm not helping all those selling podcasts and giving you kits and everything. But the way I started is I used Skype to record it. Skype is free. I used Audacity to edit audio episodes. That's free. OpenShot is an open source platform that allows you to edit videos. It's a little bit slow. Your PC hangs, but you go for a coffee and by the time you come, the video is edited or exported. Well, I mean, you have to know your balance. I was not willing to spend anything at start. And then the other thing I used was, Canva. for creating images, canva.com, free account earlier on, now other, and then create a basic version. Now people have all these questions like which microphone to use and this and that. I used, with Samsung, you get free earphones, AKG. I used that. I also had an Apple earphones. I used that. And it sounds crazy, but that's what I used. Of course, as you grow, when I had 25 episodes, I said, okay. And I was getting revenue from other sources. And I said, okay, let's buy something. And then I bought a good mic like the one you have. And then you invest in that. Then you also invest in a light like I have in front of me, which is, and I'm sure you have in front of you, which is making sure your image is looking good and all that, and you're looking like a handsome guy. So you invest in those things as you move along. But to start with, go basic, try out, experiment, as we call it, with a minimum viable product, minimum viable equipment. Try 10, 15 episodes. And if you're gaining something, that's good. But don't do, you invest a lot, then there's nobody's listening, and then you want to stop and all the investment has gone down.
I think what Jeff also mentioned, Punit, I think that's a very fair point that you put through. Jeff also mentioned that, it's not about the equipment. It's about you talking about something that was your problem, or that is a problem in the market, right? And then you kind of talk about it, right? Rather than
exactly. Yeah. You brought in technology angle. Jeff is saying you bring in a perspective. That's all. And then comes the platform. Where do you host it? So there are many platforms, $10, $20 an hour, a month, but I didn't want to spend. So there's an anchor.fm, and I think that's where you host it. So anchor.fm is a free platform. You host it. It gives you an RSS feed. You can put it on all the paid platforms. Now, is that easy? No, but that's the minimum viable product you need to create. You'll be surprised. I needed to create courses for people. I create online courses. So I applied the same principle. I said, now I want to try out a course. So minimum viable product I created is how to create a podcast, because I wanted to learn how to record. That's what I did. And that podcast course is also available for free for people.
Makes sense. Very fairly put through. And I think, believe me, I just want to kind of put this point as well. I never had that idea. So I was always looking for something to buy. And I was doing so much research online and nobody told, right? Nobody. And I think if you search what equipments to use, everybody has so many things that you should buy that mic, you should buy that earphone, you should say like that, you should have a vibe. Nobody's saying that, boss, just sit in a room, wear your earphones, right? And just start doing it, right? Nobody's saying that. And everybody's telling everything.
In fact, I'll give you my example. I went to a person who creates podcasts. He said, buy my 1,900 pound course. I said, okay, I will consider it. Then there was a deal going on. He was selling it in $499. So I bought it $499, but I haven't done it till now. Then he said, I learned at the end of the podcast, he sells a editing package, 9,999 pounds. I was willing to buy it. I was willing to buy it on call. I was about to pay, but then lockdown happened. And my revenues went down because of the lockdown. And then I was like, I still want to do podcasts to stay busy, but I don't want to invest. So you have to make it with the minimum viable product. Minimum viable meaning no cost. And I'm saying zero cost, full effort, and a lot of proficiency. Like now you are here, you're making sure your background looks good. It's elegant. You're wearing well. You're visible and those little things you take care of. That's all.
Let me add one thing. I totally agree with what you're saying, Punit. You don't need to spend a lot of money. What you do need to make sure you do is you need to make sure that you get your product out onto all of the platforms, because it's really hard to find podcast content. There's no search engine for podcasts, right? When I was putting together my database, I had to do it all really slowly and laboriously, because if you go to Google and search for Privacy Podcast, you don't get good results. You can't even find the podcasts, let alone the episodes. And even if you go to the individual things like Google Podcast, or you can't even search Apple Podcast, right? You could go to Spotify, right, or Anchor and try to search internally within them, but that doesn't work very well either. And I'm actually trying to put together through the Data Collaboration Alliance a way to actually search podcast content. So I actually scrape all the episodes of all of the podcasts including the descriptions, and we're going to make that searchable soon, so that maybe the community has actually got a better way to find all the content. But right now, it's not findable.
I also wanted to tell everyone, if they want to find a good podcast, how do they reach to your website, right? And can they still find out using your database today?
Thanks.
But how do you monetize a podcast, Jeff? If let's say somebody has made it, I know that I was not making it for money, right? I had a different goal. I wanted to talk to people and I wanted that, conversation to happen. So I was doing it, right? I love conversations, but how, if let's say somebody wants to monetize it, right? How do they do that, Jeff?
I'm probably not the best person to ask. I think the best way to do, you can put in ads into podcasts. There are lots of people that are monetizing podcasts, but I think the best way to do it is to essentially, build an audience by showing your expertise through a podcast and letting that drive your reputation and getting business that way, rather than, trying to drive business directly by saying, hey, come buy my product through the podcast. There are people that do that. I tend to think it doesn't work quite as well.
Right. So basically, the goal should not be monetizing, or maybe you kind of are not in the right direction for start. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So we have one more question here. A lot of people here agree, in my field of doing webinars, doing podcasts, people agree that networking for me, and maybe for you, and maybe for Jeff, is increasing. And network kind of helps a lot, right? Once you're trying to build something up, right? When you're trying to build something up, you cannot do so many mistakes. So Punit, what is your take on networking, right? When you are a podcaster?
I think it happens naturally. If you're a podcaster and you have an interview-based podcast, you got to search a guest every 2 weeks. So your mind kind of works. You're always looking for, who do I interview? Is this the right person? Is that the right person? Sometimes it's the right person for the next season and so on. So that's very important. But networking is the key. And regarding the monetization, you can monetize. Some people, even for networking, say that if you want to be in my podcast, you have to pay 100 euros. I know of some people. But the question is, people get to know, are you in for the money or are you in for the value? And that's the question which I said, when you start a podcast, focus on why. If you know that your long-term game is that you want to use podcast as a means, as a channel for people to know about you and your work, that's the right goal. And that's the biggest reward you will have. That'll be more tangible than any revenues you will make out of, sponsorships, pitches, or ads, anything like that. Go for a long-term approach and think of networking, because as you promote your podcast, get into network. As you connect with people, you get into network. And then people start to know you as a person who is adding value. And when you're known for that, that's when networking happens truly. Because if you know or not, me and Jeff met because of these podcasts or whatever. And then we said, what do we do more? Because I have a podcast, he has a podcast database. What do we do? So I had this fancy idea saying networking event. So we talk about networking, we said networking event. Then we said, let's create a privacy coffee house. So we created that. So when you are in this field, like an entrepreneur, you are, Jeff is, I am, and anyone else, and even as a privacy professional who wants to go out, you need to focus on value. Now, I know Jeff is a little bit of a marketer as well, or more than marketer than us. And he can say, we don't focus on SEO, we don't focus on details, because we are privacy pros. I don't know marketing. That's not my specialty. My specialty is talk to a person, get it recorded, put it out. Now, in between, if I have to do the optimization and everything, that's not my core strength. And the question is, I'm not yet willing to hire a person to do that. So I don't want to be spending 1,000 euros a month to do that, because that's a cost for me. So I look at the revenue side of it. And initially, as you mentioned, resources are thin, Akash, that you want to focus on the revenue side rather than the cost side. So if somebody says, I will make your podcast 1,000 views in a month, you'll say, boss, I'll worry about that later. First, let me serve the client. So the priorities are different.
Right. I think we all three are consultants also, right? So I think we all three somehow tomorrow we are consultants. So I think we kind of sit in a right place to do that, right, as well, in terms of a podcast. Yeah. I think gathering such a huge database, Jeff, you've spent so much time, right? Especially in listening to so many podcasts. So what is your output, in terms of, let's say listening to a podcast, right? From your angle, what is that output that somebody can take, right? Not from your perspective now, because you already have seen so much, but from somebody who's just starting and trying to listen that first episode, listening to that second episode, what is it that they should take out of it, and what should be their reason to even play press button in their precious life? What do you think? What's your take, Jeff?
Well, I think privacy podcasts are really one of the best ways to actually understand the issues. If you're reading an article or cruising through social media, you can sort of get a flavor for what's going on in the world of privacy, but you don't necessarily get the deep dives. You don't get to really think as deeply about the issues as you're likely to get when a podcaster is going to talk to an expert or delve deeply into the issue themselves, right? And really talk about it for 5 or 10 or 30 or an hour, 30 minutes or an hour. So you can really think about the complexities of an issue, whatever that may be. And there are so many issues in privacy that as a privacy pro, you're just not going to get exposure to in your normal course of your job. So that's why I find it so compelling.
Right. I would just second you on that. And when I am also making a podcast, right, and I don't know about Punit, and let him kind of take this point as well. But if somebody's kind of clicking play to my podcast, right, then my goal is always to give him that insight from what I have been doing, or from the speaker that is there, what he's actually doing. So even especially for our webinars as well. So what we do is we kind of make sure that we're not talking about general stuff, right? We're talking very specific now, because I can see people doing trainings on GDPR. See, privacy professionals are very old, and we're doing technical trainings now, right? The training is GDPR for HR, right? Not a training for GDPR anymore, because if you just know about the law, obviously there are a lot of people who need that training, right? But I'm just saying, if there's a privacy professional who wants to listen to a podcast, then I think maybe what he wants to learn out of that, right? Maybe a PIA, maybe organization level compliance. And especially when Punit said that, a data protection authority's head comes in and talks about it. So then you listen to their perspective of view, right? Maybe when Jeff comes in, you hear a perspective from an angle where what type of podcasts are coming in. So I think it kind of makes a lot of sense to this. And I have one more question. Why should we go on privacy podcast against YouTube or other media? So I think I'll just let it again for Punit. Yeah.
It's a choice. And it relates back to your question, why would somebody click? See, we are not the ones to say you go on YouTube, you go on podcast, where you want to go, you go. The question is everywhere, whether it's YouTube, whether it's podcast, people and audiences are different. Those who watch YouTube generally don't watch, say 80% of people don't watch podcasts. Those who watch podcasts, they don't go to YouTube, because podcast is like in the car, while walking, they will listen. YouTube is some people having a different methodology. They are in a metro or something, they are watching that. So it's your choice, and you have to see where your audiences are. And if you want to increase the audience size, audience base, you go for a video as well. In fact, there was a question saying, should I convert my podcast into an audio podcast into video? Well, you can, but the question will be, what is the difference I'm getting on the YouTube? Watching your podcast logo and the screen going up and down, that will not be very interesting for most people. So Think of value addition first.
I'll also post this to Jeff, because I know that Jeff would agree with me that people in the US, right, are very educated in terms of listening to podcasts, right? I know all my friends, they would go to gym, they would go to running, right? And they used to listen to podcasts, right? So Jeff, what is your take on this?
I started listening to podcasts, a while before, I've been listening to podcasts for a long time. I started listening to privacy podcasts when I started studying for my CIPP-US, because I really wanted to immerse myself in the subject matter. But I listen to them when I'm walking, when I'm driving, when I'm playing video games. I put them on in the background, right? And it's just, for me, it's an easier way to inculcate me in the subject matter when I'm doing other things and I can't read an article. So it's just a great way to sort of not really multitask, but to some extent multitask, I guess, to get more things done.
I think most people who talk about productivity or self-improvement, they would say, expose yourself to new ideas and different ideas. Now, with all of us being consultants and entrepreneurs, and those of us who are also working in a job, we work 8 to 12 hours a day. So when is the time to do all this? When do you listen to podcasts? So the simple answer is when you are in gym, when you are walking, when you're going to office, when you're coming back from your office, or maybe sometimes when you're in the toilet. Use those little moments. I call it no extra time. When there is no extra time, you use those little moments and create time out of that and listen to a podcast, listen to news. I mean, not the news, I mean, the real news on BBC, CNN, and timesofIndia.com, because they don't add any value. They only create distraction. So you listen to podcasts, you listen to other things and follow up. That's the way to do it. And that's where podcast fits in. I know, Akarsh, you're smiling, but that's how it is. We don't have time.
I am smiling only on toilets.
But is that not good use of time?
It's great use, because I try not to take mobile phones nowadays when I'm going to, I think this is a secret, right? I'm just letting everyone know. When I'm going to washrooms nowadays, I'm not taking mobile phones. Mm-hmm. And I get so many ideas over there. I'm like, boss, okay, this is something that I did not think. And this is another box in my life.
Exactly. So using the no extra time, whichever way, I mean, some people use it listening, some people use it thinking, but you have to give yourself those moments. You don't have time. You can't say 8 to 12. I mean, the 12 hours I'm working, I will listen to podcast at that time. It won't work.
Yeah. I think I'll kind of point out as well to everyone here that podcast is also a way of education. So, and you're not just listening to it because of masala, as I said, right? Just to keep you hooked. It is also because you're learning something out of it, right? And that should be treated like that. And that should be respected like that when you are kind of putting in time or not putting in time. Because if you are putting in time to get some knowledge, to get some perspective, you're getting something out of it. So if you're going to the gym, come on, 15 minutes, guys. It can be on YouTube. You can download it on YouTube. It can be on Spotify. It doesn't matter, right? It just matters what do you want to listen to. And I know you want to listen to PrivacyCast, but I did not say that. So Jeff, I know your favorite privacy podcast is PrivacyCast, but still, because Punit sir is here, so I still have to ask this. What is, I was just kidding. I'm just asking you very seriously because a lot of people are here. So what is your favorite privacy podcast? If let's say you have seen so many podcasts in the world, what is the podcast you recommend? Maybe somebody is starting into privacy, right? Getting that initial input to podcast, right? Rather than being specific, complicated, just easy answer, right? What is that first podcast that you would suggest? And again, no bias because of me and Punit sir here. No bias, please be.
I said, I was saying there are so many. It really depends upon what angle you want to focus on in terms of your privacy. I mean, if you want to focus on a compliance focus, I would say probably maybe serious privacy. If you want to focus on technology, PrivacyCast, your podcast is great, or maybe Debbie Reynolds, the Data Diva PrivacyCast. If you want to focus on policy, the U.S. National Privacy Legislation podcast is really great. And David Strauss has a new one for the United States podcast. I forget what that one's called. It's really good. I mean, it just really depends upon the angle. I mean, what do you want to focus on, right? I mean, for compliance and GDPR, Punit's podcast is awesome. It just depends on what your interest is. So, I mean, it's really hard to say overall which one is the best. I mean, I try to do that with my top 10 list, but really it's, to some extent, it's sort of fanciful, right? Because it depends upon what your interest is.
Right. I think, what about Punit? What about you, right? What is your Fit for Privacy is the best podcast before that?
Of course, Fit for Privacy and the PrivacyCast are the best. But let me give you a perspective, which ones I listen apart from these.
Yeah.
So I think the way it works is you need to listen to multitude of podcasts. Just because Akarsh or I am saying yes, you should listen to our podcast, but listen to others as well. The whole concept is, as Akarsh said, it's about listening and learning. And if you want to learn, you cannot say, I learn from Akash, I can learn from Punit, I learn from Jeff. You have to learn from everybody. So listen to multitude of podcasts. Some you will like, some you will not like. The ones you like, you listen to them more, but do listen to others, because that gives you a different perspective and allows you to grow. Because the objective is not to like somebody, objective is to grow. And if the objective is to grow, you need to expose yourself to multitude of ideas and thoughts. And as Jeff mentioned, look at your different objectives, then choose the podcast, but not one, many podcasts. And everyone has its own advantage.
Right. I think one more, Jeff pointed out a very important thing. That initially he said that, and I kind of want to mention that again. It may not be about the podcast. It may be about the episode that you want to listen to, right? So
yeah,
I think
that's a great point too.
Yeah. It's also the episode, and sometimes it's the person. Like I had Dr. Anne Kavakyo, the creator of Privacy by Design, and people wanted to listen to her. So, and then when I have a data protection authority head, they want to listen to that person. So everyone has his preference. Who do they want to listen to? And so you can pick and choose and expose yourself to multiple ideas. That's the simplest way of learning.
Well, that's why the episode focus and descriptions and titles are so important, right? Because if you don't entitle them well, you're not going to potentially expose yourself to new audiences, right? Because maybe somebody doesn't particularly like your podcast, Punit. Maybe they've listened to a few episodes and they don't like it. But then they see you've got Ann Kevorkian, right? And they're like, oh, crap, I better listen to that one, right? Yeah. And then they listen to it and they're like, oh, wow, maybe I should start listening to Punit more. I mean, that's how you grow audiences.
Yeah, Jeff, just like after this, that people will see that the PrivacyCast next episode has Jeff Jockisch and Punit Bhatia. Maybe, that is a hook. Who knows?
Right.
Have you come across any DRM stories that you would like to share with us? And I don't know about DRM right now, so I still
digital rights management.
Digital rights management. Okay, yeah.
I don't know if I've seen any of those recently. That was in the news quite a lot in the past, but I haven't seen anything new that I'd want to talk about.
So I think somebody has asked for the list of Jeff. I have actually posted it, and it's very simple to get. Right, you just have to Google PrivacyPlan, and on the website you will just find the list. So you don't have to go think about so many. It's not tricky. Just Google PrivacyPlan, right? And you will find Jeff. The website has direct link.
It's easy to find. PrivacyPlan, no space.
Okay. So I think we are very good with the session, right? We're very good with the session. And thank you for helping me record a podcast video for me. It's very difficult, as we have discussed, right? It takes time, it takes effort, right? And it takes a lot of investment, right? To kind of get a podcast now, because maybe when I was starting, I was doing small podcasts, but now there is a lot of effort, believe me, right? It's calling people, getting the right times, right? Then producing it, because now people are expecting better podcasts. I cannot do the same thing that I was doing in podcast number 1. So yeah, I think this kind of ends up great, because I have one more episode. So thank you to Jeff, and thank you to Punit, first of all, joining the session, helping everybody around, right, to kind of understand with a fair perspective, rather than, I know so many people who kind of just keep promoting their own, like I was doing for PrivacyCast. I'm just saying that being fair enough, pointing out to the right podcast. And also, I think we have such a great database for you. It's privacyplan.net. And Punit and Jeff, over to you for thank you notes. Yeah, to everyone.
Thank you so much for having us. And thanks for the great work you are doing. Because I see you have assembled a nice community and you're helping them through webinars, through podcasts, and through other means. And you have those WhatsApp groups and everything. So keep on doing that. You're doing very well. And you need to kind of, help others. That's the most important thing. And for us, I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for having me. It was a great pleasure.
Thanks. Great work.
Yeah. So I just want to thank all of you for joining this session, spending such a precious time, right? So Jeff, thank you. Punit, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining this session. And we will see you again, and have a nice day. Bye.